Hey guys, welcome back. So for today's tutorial, it's going to be a continuation from the last tutorial I did. The last tutorial I did was how to remove a subject from a background and to place it onto another backdrop to start the process of your composited piece. If you missed that one, you can find the other video on my YouTube channel, and I will add a link down to the bottom as well. So now we're picking up from where we left off. This right here is our subject that we had placed on there from the last tutorial, and then the rose is the backdrop that we're going to be working with. What I did notice about my backdrop of my rose, it's a little light right in here. My subject has this really dark shadow on her. I'm going to add a shadow into my backdrop just to kind of blend it better into my subject. Then I'm also going to be adding more light into the shadow of my subject and removing some of it off of her as well. What I'm going to do first though is I'm going to make sure I have my backdrop selected, and I'm going to go down here to my layers panel and scroll up to curves. Now I'm going to pull back on my shadows to kind of pull them in a little bit more. Like I said, I'm focusing mostly in this area right in here because the sun or the light source is going to be coming in from this direction. I'm also going to add a light source in from the top direction as well. So I've got my curves panel, and I'm going to pull down the shadows. I'm also going to pull down the highlights a little bit, and it's just going to be to the taste of whatever backdrop you're working with to make it blend better with your subject. That looks good. Now I'm going to make sure I click onto my white layer mask over here, make sure I have my black selected, and choose my brush. I'm going to size it down. I'm going to make sure it's at 100% opacity. I'm just going to brush away the areas that I don't want the shadow or the darkened area to be affected on the backdrop. Now it's not affecting my subject at all because it's just on top of my backdrop layer. My subject is above that layer. I'm going to change my brush to white, and I'm going to drop the opacity down a little bit on it just to kind of blend it in here some and to soften it up on the edges. Like I said, we can always go back and change the adjustments if we need to make it darker or lighter a little bit later by just clicking on this and just by going in and changing that later. I'm going to leave it right now how it is. Now I'm going to remove some of the shadow off of her and see how that looks. I want to click onto my subject, make sure I've selected that layer. Go down here to my layers panel. I'm going to go same thing, go up to curves, select that. This time I am going to boost my shadows, and it's going to affect the entire image. The reason why it's affecting the entire image is you have to have this layer connected to this layer, and you can do that by hovering over the layer, holding down the Shift Alt key, and it's going to make that little box down here with the arrow pointing down, and you'll just click on the image in between it. Now what it is, it added that layer onto just affecting the layer that it's pointing down towards. See how that's just affecting her. So I'm going to boost up the shadows. Like I said, I'm mostly focusing right in here, and I'm going to zoom in just a bit. I'm not too concerned with up here. I'm going to remove some of that here in a moment. I'm just, like I said, focusing right in here. going to boost the contrast up just a little bit, give it a little bit of a matte feel in here as well, soften it up some. Maybe pull in. Okay, let's see how that looks. I'm going to select my white layer, make sure that my black is selected, and go up to my brush tool again. I'm going to be on, I'm going to go up to 75% and just kind of brush some of this away from her. I'm going to drop down my brush just a little bit more. And I'm going to remove some of this. I feel like I really like the way that bumped it up. If I don't, I can always go back in and change it. Same thing, just click on this and move the controls over here. But I'm going to leave it just like that for right now. I'm also going to add, I think I'm going to add a pink gradient right in here just to kind of soften it up. And then I'm also going to add some pink on her just right in here in this area to give it that reflection of the rose is reflecting onto her and onto her skin, just like if you were to stand in front of say a green screen or something that has an intense color, it's going to reflect that same color onto your skin and onto your clothing. So you kind of want to match those colors blending up onto your subject as well. So I'm going to add a new layer. Then I'm going to go back down to my backdrop down here, and I'm going to select my drop tool and pick a color. And here's your color right here. You can do it two different ways. You can click on this and just move over here to your subject, and you can move this around too if it's ever in your way. I'm just going to select a pink color. I think that might be a little too intense. I'm going to go with this color and see how that looks. I can always soften it up too. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to go back up to that layer. I'm going to go over to my gradient tool. And I'm going to go up here and select it. And see, it's already put it up here for us. But I don't want to have this black. I'm going to have a transparent foreground. And it's already, it goes from this color to transparent. So there's going to be no color behind this, which that's exactly what I want. So I'm going to push OK. Then I'm just going to click around my subject and drag it up. I'm going to change this. Let me see how it looks under screen light. Let me try a soft light. Soft light looks really nice on that. But I think it's just a bit too dark. Let me drop that down some. Oh, that's really nice. See how I added that really soft look? Now, once again, it added it to the entire subject and the background. If I click it off, it's affected the background as well. And that's fine for this first step, but the next step, like I said, I'm going to add some pink on her dress where it's reflecting back off of the rose petals up towards her and her face in the shadowy area. How I'm going to do that for this step though is I'm actually going to duplicate this layer. I'm going to right click, go up to duplicate layer, click OK. Then I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to hold down the Shift Alt, and it's going to merge into my subject only. Now, the pink is actually going the wrong direction. I don't want it to go. So I'm going to go up here to my Move tool, and I'm just going to flip that around. And you see down here in this little box, it flipped the gradient completely around. I'm just going to kind of move it around. I don't want it to be too intense on her. You see what it did to her when I added that pink? It just adds that little pop of the reflection of the rose onto her. I think this one here is a bit too intense for me, so I'm actually going to change that color. I'm going to lighten it up a bit. Let's see what that does. I'm going to drag this layer down and throw it in the trash can and just start a new layer. Click my gradient. The same steps, just drag it up to my corner. Go to soft light. That looks like it softened it up quite a bit. I really like the way that made that image look, how it blended it. It's all about preference on how you want it to look and how you want it to blend with your subject. The next step I'm going to do also is you'll want to get in and really look at your subject and make sure that you've gotten all of your edges removed and all of the edges blend very well. This subject right here, I had already pre-cut her out, and I had already went in and blurred any little rough edges. But you can do that by clicking your subject and going over here to your blur tool and just setting the strength on the blur and just going around the edges and just slightly blurring it and blending it just to kind of match and blend in. And you want to make sure your depth of field matches the subject that they're in. So whenever you first put a subject on a flower or a grass backdrop or anything like that, you want to make sure that the grass at their feet matches the way that they look. So you know all of that needs to be in focus, so they need to be on the same plane as far as being in focus. So I know my flower needs to be in focus, but the dress at the very bottom doesn't need to be as in focus because it's going to kind of blend in a little bit with the flower anyways. So you want to be careful as far as how much you're blurring the hair and the neck and the back and just any other areas. You don't want to blur it too much unless that is the look you're going for. If that's the look you're going for, then by all means go for that look. So since I've already done that, I'm just going to skip that step. The next thing I'm going to do too is there's this really harsh highlights right here on her. I'm just going to soften it up just a hair by clicking back onto my subject. I'm going to go down here to my layers panel, go up to my curves again. Then I'm going to pull down the highlights and see how that looks. I'm just focusing right in here on her. Not worried about back down here. I'll remove that here in a moment. I'm going to bring up the matte just a little bit, not too much. See how that really removed some of those strong highlights off of her. And it really kind of gave her skin this soft look to it. I like that. So now I'm going to go back up, select my brush tool, make sure my black is selected, make sure my white panel is selected as well. I'm going to go up to I'm just going to go up to 100%. Make sure I have a nice soft brush. And I'm going to brush away the areas I didn't want it to affect. So I didn't want to darken in here again, because I just removed all of that. See how it just affected her back area. Okay, I like the way that looked. That looks right there. I like the pink that it added to that. Now the next step, I have a couple of pre-made layers that I use. You can make your own different layers. I'll try to make one right here and see if this gives the same effect that I used with my pre-made layer. I'm going to open up a new layers panel, go over to my colors, and I'm going to choose a creamy, looking for a bright creamy color. And this is the color I'm looking for. It's going to be like a sunlight, a light leak coming right down in here. It's going to leak right down onto her and onto the flower. But I want it to be a soft orange creamy color. I think I'm going to like that color right there. So we'll see how that looks. I'm going to go to my gradient tool again. This time though, I'm going to change it to the radius, or the radial blur. I'm just going to click it and drag it up. Not quite sure how big I'm going to. It was my fault. I need to change that. So you're going to reverse that because you need it to be a circle. Now I've got that, and I'm going to drag it up just above her, and I want it to be kind of an oval, so I'm going to change the shape of this. I'm going to stretch it down, pull it in. I'm just kind of placing it where I want it to be placed at. It's, like I said, it's all about preference as far as how you want your final piece to look. And you can also change the shape of it. I'm going to have it flare out just a little bit more on this end. Then I'm going to brush some off of her by adding a mask. I'm going to go down here to my layers mask, add a layer mask on there, make sure I've got my white, got my black clicked right over here. grab my brush. I'm going to start off at 50%, around that range, and brush it off of her hair. Just a little bit. I don't want to brush it completely off because it needs to be on her. Then I'm going to tone this down just a bit too. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a brown. I like to add a warm sort of border around here. It's kind of a vignette border, but it's going to mostly affect down in here, a little bit up in here and here, but it's going to be mostly, the effect is going to be right down in here. I'm going to do that. I already have that pre-made as well, but I'm going to show you just say real quick how you can make your own. It all depends on what kind of colors you're going for. You can do blue, you can do red, you can do whatever color that you're going to go for. But I am going to add a new layer. Go over to my colors, and I'm going to pick a brown color. Let's see how this color looks right here. Now I'm going to do the reverse with the gradient tool. I'm going to make sure my circle or my radial is selected. Reverse it. I'm going to drag out and add it around it. And this might be a little too dark for what I like. I usually like a more of a reddy, the reddish colors in there. But we're going to see how this looks. But you know what? I am going to do it just a little bit smaller in here. That way I can stretch this out. Sort of shape it how I want it to be shaped. I'm going to change this to soft light. You see how it really added that dramatic look to the image. You can always move it around. You see the before and the after. Really brings in those dark, earthy brown tones in there. I'm going to click OK. Now I want my light leak to be on top of this, so I'm actually going to pick my light leak, drag it above it, and put it on top of it. And then I'm going to remove some of this as well. Let me drop it down to about 85%, and then I'm going to add a layer mask. Just go in here. I'm going to start out with 25% on the brush and just kind of work from there. Now I want to make sure my black is selected as well again. Just going to kind of brush away a little bit in here. Turn that off and show you what the effect did. It really gave it that dramatic, kind of pulls your eye right into the subject alone. Okay guys, I believe that's going to be it for the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please drop them down in the comment box. You can always message me as well. I'd love to hear from you guys. Please don't forget also to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, like this video. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye.